This is the True Voice Media Podcast. I'm your host, Jeff Gibbard. Back in 2011, I started a social business agency called True Voice Media. In 2013, I launched this podcast because my audience told me that they wanted to learn more about how social media could help them grow their business, but they wanted it to be interesting and without all the standard social media hype and BS. Just someone who will give it to them straight with honest, simple strategies that they can use today. If you're a new listener and that sounds like what you want too, listen to this episode. And if you love it, subscribe to our show. We'd love to have you on board. So without further ado, let's get started. Here it goes. This is episode 45. I'm here with Saba. Saba is a returning guest, perhaps the most delightful of our guests, which is, of course, not to say anything about the rest of our guests who are also delightful, but is to say something truly magical and wonderful about Saba. Saba, say hello to all the nice people listening.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to be back. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
Of course. I want to talk to you about Snapchat.
Snapchat. That completely makes sense, right? Because I think that I was one of the few people who was constantly poking at you to get on Snapchat. Is that correct?
You were. You were one of those people that was poking at me. Today I'm doing something that I normally never do, and I'm actually sharing a good portion of my day on Snapchat. I don't know about you. I feel like the same type of person that watches reality TV is the person who appreciates the majority of what happens on Snapchat. Am I wrong?
Yes.
Okay, so we're going to dig deeper into that. But I think that, I watch a lot of Snapchat snaps, and I see people just talking about, and I'm going to sound like you kids these days. I remember when Twitter was early and people were like, I don't care that you're eating a taco. And it's the same complaints that I'm about to levy against Snapchat. But now it's an even more, I feel like it's a heavier time investment because I'm tapping through people's lives and they're sharing so much mundane and boring stuff. And I'm just waiting to find the few people that are really, really interesting. And honestly, and I say this 100% honestly, you are one of the few people I really enjoy following because I feel like you actually do something different with the platform, whereas most people are like, hey, I'm about to go to the grocery store, and I don't know, maybe it's that I'm busier now than I used to be, but correct me on this. Tell me how you see Snapchat right now. Tell me about Snapchat through your eyes so that I can see it maybe differently.
Okay. So the way that I see Snapchat, I've been on it, just to give a little context to your viewers, I've been on the platform since 2011. And so when I first started using it, they didn't have the functionality that it has today. It doesn't have all of the drawing features, the emoji features, the text features, the filters. It didn't even have the story feature. So it was just about a communication platform with your friends to be able to say, hey, I'm shopping and I want to send that one dress I'm going to buy for that party to 10 of my friends simultaneously. So as the years went on, they decided to add a lot of functionality. And with that functionality, I think that I learned to storytell a lot better. Now, I'm saying this because on Instagram and Facebook, I was posting content, but I felt like the production of that content just took too long. I would take a bunch of pictures somewhere, and then I have to go home, I would have to edit it, make sure I have a caption, and then I would post it the next day. And I felt like that's a huge delay in a world where we are constantly moving very, very quickly, and there is so much noise, and there is so much going on. I felt like if I was going to post something the next day, it was almost irrelevant. And so that gets me to Snapchat. Why do I love Snapchat? Why have I chosen to evangelize it? Why have I chosen to teach it to businesses? Is because I think that it's very, very important to capture the moments in the present time, right? One of my favorite questions that I've ever received is, how long did it take you to make that story, right? So if you consume my story, for example, Jeff, yesterday, and you asked me, how long did it take you to create that? I would say I have no clue. Because as I was doing those actions in the moment, I took probably 1 minute, right? And 1 minute is, for me, because I'm adding the creative and I know all the tools and the functionalities, I've learned how to efficiently get the content out there, but I'm creating that content, I'm posting it, and we're moving on, right? I'm not thinking about it later on. And I think that is the most important thing, that we're able to storytell in a way that is so true to how we live our lives. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 minutes, right? But if it's interesting, we'll snap it and we'll share it. And if it's not interesting, we're not going to share it. So the thing that I love about Snapchat is that you can capture micro moments of your day, and automatically the way that the stories are built, it creates a timeline for you. It creates a story for you. Now you can be more intentional with that story, or you can just be more haphazard with that story. Whether you choose to be intentional or not is really up to you and how you want to use the platform, right? So for me, like, I make it an effort. I make an effort to create really engaging, creative content because I care about my audience. I don't say this is what I'm gonna create, and if someone doesn't watch it, I don't care. I'm always looking to push the boundaries and tell the best story. And so I think when you look at it like that, it really highlights how different the DNA of Snapchat is versus every other platform that is currently out there.
So I see a lot of what you're saying.
Okay.
Like I can try it on. I can almost see all of it. But there's pieces of it that I still come back to and I say, for instance, why can't you do that anywhere else? Like, so the function of it disappearing is really there are two. I don't know how many. I'm not going to enumerate them. I'm just going to list off the things that I see as being different about Snapchat than anything else. And by different, I mean not even vastly different, just slightly different. It's faster. So I can get right into it and create content and share content. And that's something that I've been harping on Twitter for a while, is that it's too many taps. You open up in Snapchat and you're immediately creating content. So I can put 10-second video together. I basically hit submit and it's going. It's off. It's off to the races. It's up. When I submit a 10-second Twitter video, it still takes 20, 30 seconds to get up there. And if I post it up there, it's still going to show in a timeline just like on Snapchat, but it's faster to get it up from Snapchat. So that's one. Two, it disappears. So it's naturally going to disappear. That's part of the function of it. I don't have to do anything different for it to disappear, but it disappears. And I think the third thing is that the editor, the actual content creator editor within Snapchat that you use so extraordinarily well, which, by the way, anybody listening, and I'm going to put this in the show notes, I'm going to put Saba's Snap code. You need to follow Saba because she creates these unbelievable masterpieces of emoji art that you just really have to see to believe. But those are the only three things I see as different. And in terms of how we use it and how we decide to tell that story, it doesn't seem fundamentally different to me than posting that same day in the life on Facebook or Twitter or whatever. And in fact, I think there's even more efficient ways. And when that content then disappears, one of the things that's always a kind of a phrase that's occurred to me when I think of Snapchat is at the end of the day, as a marketer, you have nothing to show for it. Except for the relationship. I mean, we can go down that rabbit hole, but I mean, in terms of as a marketer advising clients, how do you confront the fact that at the end of the day, unless you pull it down and put it elsewhere, which is it defeats the purpose of that that ephemeral quality of it disappearing, what do you have to show for it? How do you make that case?
Yeah, so let's address some of the things. I actually wrote them down so we can go through them one by one. So the first one was you talked about impressions. You said, you can upload that same video on, for example, like a Twitter or a Facebook, right? The issue is that when you're posting on those platforms, well, Twitter has no algorithm, which is a huge problem because it's just a fire hose. So you don't actually know.
I actually disagree. As a Twitter evangelist and a huge fan, I would say that they never should have an algorithm or go 10,000 characters. We can discuss that more later.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying they should. I'm just saying that the reality is that they don't. So regardless of how good or bad your content is or how much someone wants to see Jeff Gibbard or not, it doesn't matter because
Agreed.
It's just going to be free flowing. So in terms of impressions, so we have to go back to why people post on social media, right? People post on social media because they want people to know, and they want to know that people know, if that makes sense, right? So when I'm posting something on Facebook, I'm not saying, oh God, I hope no one likes that. I'm saying, God, I hope people acknowledge it. I hope people give me attention, and I hope they know and they remember it, right? Mm-hmm. Now, the issue with that is that a platform like Facebook, which, yes, has 1 billion views, it has a very robust, system in which it figures out, who's important, who's not, has a web and mobile. The issue is that you're not guaranteed the attention of the people that follow you. That's the issue. And so what I like about Snapchat is that when I decide to post content, right, and when I'm posting content, it's taking me a minute to create that content, I can see literally 5 minutes later that 20 people have looked at it. Their eyeballs have seen it. And then in an hour, I see that 60 people have seen it. And then in 5 hours, 400 people have seen it. And that to me makes every 60 seconds that I spent making that content worth it for me. Now, if I were to take all those pieces, and I've done this before, I've taken pieces, I've downloaded it, I created it in landscape mode, I uploaded it as a photo on Twitter, nothing, no engagement, right? So do I have any motivation to make that content? Absolutely not. So that's how I feel about the impressions. A lot of people say there's no way to measure it. And I say, you know what? I think there's no streamlined way. There's no web application that you can measure it as, but those eyeball views, those matter. When people take screenshots of a bottle of kombucha that I've posted and there's 5 screenshots, that's 5 people that I've influenced. That's 5 people that have decided to save content to their camera roll, right? That is an action on top of an action, right? So that it's double the engagement, right? And then the second thing is that people say, well, this content goes away after 24 hours. And I tell them, well, you know, if you're not on Facebook in 24 hours, you're not going to see that person's content the next day anyways, unless it has like 100 likes, right? Or on Twitter, unless you go onto their profile. So I think this idea of having content be living on forever is not necessarily needed for every platform, because Facebook does that, Twitter does that, Medium does that, right? All these platforms, they're constantly storing all of our content. So there needs to be a platform that's constantly just saying, today you have to create new content, and it's content centric. None of your credibility is based on what you did 6 months ago, 3 months ago, 2 months ago, or yesterday. Today you're telling me that I create great content, right, Jeff? If I stop creating content for a week, you're going to stop telling people to follow me, right? Because there's nothing for them to watch. And that should be how social media is. That should be how we use our time. But time and time again, I hear when people say, oh, you should follow that person because they have 200,000 followers on Twitter. And then I look at their feed and they're posting the same thing over and over and over again within a month, right? So you address the editing features. One of the things that I love about Snapchat, which you mentioned, previously when we started talking about this, is that you can actually do all of your creativity within the app, which is really, really great. I don't have to go into Canva, create a graphic, and then put it on Twitter, right? I don't have to go and edit my picture in some other app and then post it on Facebook or Instagram. The nice thing is that all the tools that I want, that I need, are within Snapchat. And one of the things that I always tell people is that Snapchat empowers creativity. There's no other platform where I am as creative and as almost relaxed as I am on Snapchat, because I feel like Snapchat allows for me to do that with their lenses, with their emojis, with all of the different video filters that they have to, make it go backwards and forwards and slow it down. I feel like that makes it exciting, and that constantly allows people to keep testing and pushing the limits. And so even the most plain people that I personally know in real life, when I watch their Snapchats, they're constantly dabbling in all these little things. And I think empowering creativity is a very, very strong thing, and it captures someone at their core, right? Because you get to know who they are and how they want to express themselves. It's almost like how you dress. When someone dresses in a very interesting way, even if that's not really your taste, you enjoy consuming that, right? You enjoy looking at it because it's different. It's expression. And I think that when you try to sterilize everything in a feed like Facebook or Instagram or things like that, I think it takes away from it. And I'm not saying that those things are bad. I'm just saying that there needs to be more. There needs to be a platform like Snapchat.
So I don't disagree with a lot of that, but I agree there needs to be a platform like Snapchat. And really what I want to explore a little bit later in this conversation is why Snapchat instead of something else. I'm free to say I believe that companies should be keeping an eye on it. I believe companies should be thinking about how it might work for them. But in general, if I'm being what I perceive to be an ethical marketer, the smartest thing for me to do is not to recommend Snapchat above everything else. But I want to go back to a couple things you said. I want to dig deeper on the why Snapchat thing in a minute. But you said that the Snapchat editor empowers creativity. And I think I can agree with that about 60%. But the other 40% that I can't agree with, and this is, to your point about the Instagram feed or the Facebook feed, is that when you're enabling people to use the same set of tools, so think about Instagram filters and the frames and the different things. When everybody started using the Lomo filter or the X Pro filter, all of their pictures wound up looking pretty much the same, right? So we've basically given people a common set of filters. And in the same way, Snapchat, while they are adding new filters all of the time and all of that sort of good stuff and taking away older ones, really every single person that puts on that puppy face is the same as every other person that's put on the puppy face. So when you start to achieve scale on something like Snapchat, you're starting to see that the creativity actually starts to become that sterilized. Everybody has the same kind of look and feel. So that's the first thing. The second thing I want to touch on was actually there's three things I want to touch on. That's the first. The second one was you had mentioned that, that on Twitter and Facebook that you can go back and look at those things, but how often do you actually go back and look at people's stuff? And while I agree with that, and I think to your point, we do need a platform that just says, you got to come back. I do think that there's a certain middle ground between you have to create content every single day and your content lives on forever, that nobody's going to go back and look at the previous day. Because what I think is a real challenge with Snapchat is when you meet and find new people, you have no idea if they're going to be good or not in terms of something that they need to, and they can't curate and say, hey, here's something I've done that's illustrative of what it is that I do on Snapchat. And I think just randomly any one of your stories, if you were to pick out an image with a lot of those emojis all over it and the way you choose to use the platform, it would showcase to people that you're a different kind of storyteller. Now, they could roll the dice and follow you and learn that you're awesome, or they could wind up following some awful people, and then you have to constantly trim and curate the feed, which leads me to my third point, which is that Twitter is a fire hose, and you can choose to like that or not like that. I personally love it and I'm fine with it, and I prefer to create lists to filter my own experience. Facebook uses an algorithm to do it. The problem I'm seeing right now with Snapchat is that it's everybody that I follow all in one. So there's no way for me to segment or make a list. I just have to search through and remember people's names and all that to be able to follow an individual set of stories. And what we talked about in the beginning is I personally find probably about 85 to 95% of the snaps that I watch are just pure unadulterated garbage. And that's just because I think people aren't putting in creativity. They aren't saying anything particularly thoughtful or interesting. They're sharing the mundane, they're sharing the silly, and some people are sillier and funnier than others, and I like following them. But the vast majority of people I follow are either saying and doing the same thing every day. They're boring, or they're just not doing it. So I think there's still a lot of problems on the Snapchat side of things. So what I'd love to know from you, I know that you're a major evangelist for Snapchat, but what are some of the things that if you could sit down with Snapchat's leadership right now, you would suggest to them, or that you would advise them fixing, changing, updating, or whatever?
Yeah, you make a good point. You brought up the fact that you can't, almost like favorite some of your favorite content creators so that like their stories come up on top, and maybe you like get a notification about it or something like that. So I do agree that's definitely one of the pain points. One of the things that I've done, which I think is the extent of the hack that maybe like resolves this issue, is that I have decided to basically tag people in my Snapchat friends. So what do I mean by that? I mean that if they're all my best friends, they have a certain emoji in front of their name, so that when I'm going into my list, or when I'm going into like my feed where all the stories are getting queued up, I immediately know how to find them, because I don't want to take the time to read those names. I just want an emoji to tell me this person is important, consume their content.
That's smart.
And I do this with people that are in the social media world that are just, acquaintances. I do this with social media people that I think are influencers. I do this with people that I think are at the top of the food chain on Snapchat. I do this with brands. Every brand that I have on Snapchat is tagged with a certain emoji. And so I'm constantly making sure that I'm not only being efficient with the way I'm consuming the content and how much I'm spending time, figuring out who I need to look at. I'm also tagging them, because as I quickly go through who's watching my content, I want the people that I care about, I want to know if they're consuming it, right? So for example, Jeff, you have a peace sign in front of you, or like a hand that's doing the peace sign. So when you look at my content, I immediately know. And I do that because there's all these people around you, above your name and below your name, that I have no idea. And they all just look like letters to me, right? And when I'm quickly scrolling through that, I want to know who's looking at my content, right? And I also look at, hey, when did you drop off, right? When did you stop watching? I'm constantly paying attention to this, right? So it really matters how intentional you want to be. So I definitely think that would be one of the suggestions. I think Peach actually did this, where you can favorite one of your profiles. And so their updates actually show up higher and before everyone else's. So I think that would be a really good thing. I think being able to organize it a little bit better. I also think that one of the things that they should do is that they should allow you to respond to a Snapchat video in your story with video and not just chat.
Yep.
I think that would be really good. But you can still send them a video and say, hey, oh, I like that video in your story. But I think that if you were able to do it in a more streamlined manner, people would utilize it. I remember when the chat feature came out, I was like, no one's going to use this. Wow, it's incredible how many people use it. It's actually insane because they're only going to want to react to that content the moment that they're consuming it, right? And that's what Snapchat is really good at capturing. How can we capture what's happening now? So I think that they do have things that they could definitely improve upon. And what you said, like the curation. Another thing that you addressed is, when you follow bad content creators. And it's difficult because there's nowhere you can, like on Instagram, you can go say, oh, hey, like this person is really great, and you're looking at their feed and then you choose to follow them. But on Snapchat, you're kind of like following the blind in a way. Unless someone is recommending, you don't really know how to discover. And I think that's a good and bad thing for Snapchat. I think it's good because when people add you, it's a little bit more intentional, right? It's not because an algorithm or a bot found you because of like the keywords in your profile. It's legitimately like when I have 10 people that add me like within like 2 hours on Snapchat, I get excited because that means that they were very intentional with that. The downside of that is that you're constantly curating, like you just mentioned. And the good thing is that, Snapchat is getting a lot more press. People are talking about it more. Podcasts like this help, where you can recommend people that you really like. I can recommend people that I really like. And there's going to come a point where, the people that are, creating the best are going to rise to the top and people are going to know them. But, to your same point, there's a lot of people that enjoy that like frivolous, funny, reality TV content. And if you don't enjoy that, then you should talk to people who you think that would be following really great people, really great content creators, and follow them. I'm going to share some of my favorite people that I follow, and I'm going to share also why I follow them. Because just because I like their content doesn't mean you're going to like their content, right? So I think we have to be aware of that. And we choose what we decide to consume, right? It's just like YouTube. There's a lot of really bad things on YouTube that I would never spend time on, right? But there's people consuming that. That's why they're creating that content. So we have to be a little bit more, I think, understanding of how people use platforms because everyone has their own unique way, right?
So I'm also shocked by people using the chat feature on Snapchat because to me, maybe it's because I'm 35 and maybe I'm just getting old, but I can't remember what somebody wrote about when they respond to my chat from forever ago. And all I have is what they replied. They're like, haha, yeah. I'm like, I have no idea what that's about. What I said to you disappeared. So I don't understand why we don't just use actual good messengers instead of the Snapchat thing. Hey everyone, I just want to take a moment out to thank one of the partners that we have that makes this show possible, WP Engine. Back in the days of dial-up, people would wait for websites to load, but attention spans are shorter than ever. Did you know that the average attention span has dropped to a mere 8 seconds? And for reference, the average attention span of a goldfish is only 9 seconds. So you only have a short period of time to hook people on your website, and if half that time is spent waiting for the page to load, you are sure to lose customers. Beyond that, what do you do when your website goes down? Who do you call? Well, today's best businesses are running websites that load quickly and have virtually no downtime. In the event something does go wrong, the best businesses are back up and running in no time. That's why the best businesses trust WP Engine for hosting. If you're running a WordPress site like nearly 20% of the entire web, you owe it to yourself to upgrade your hosting to WP Engine. It's fast, it's secure, and their support is amazing. We use WP Engine at True Voice Media, and over the next 18 months, we're planning to move every single one of our sites to WP Engine. That's how good it is. Right now, WP Engine is offering 2 months free when you prepay for the entire year. And when you get to the site, look along the top of the page for additional discounts and offers. Go to truevoicmedia.com/hosting to learn more about the best damn WordPress hosting on the web. What do you think about the idea of a Reese Nap? Like the idea where if somebody's Snapchat story has something really cool, you could re-snap it, and that would be a way to promote and get you'd be able to, whoever's watching, let's say you resnapped one of my snaps, whoever watched that, they'd be able to like click something and be able to come to my profile and start following me. What do you think about that as an idea?
Yeah, I don't like that. So I like the fact that you can only share your content. Right. So you can only do it native to your profile. So the way that like I see that working is that if I resnap something of yours, if there was a button called resnap, what would happen is it would pull that Snapchat and it would insert it into my story. And like your like snap code would be there somewhere or something like
Yeah.
that, with a way where like they can actually, if they click that, then they add you. The issue with that is that then you're just like curating other people's content, right? And I think that Snapchat has done a really good job of saying, hey, if you really like someone, go talk about them on Instagram, go talk about them on Facebook, go talk about them on a Medium post, right? I mean, they didn't just get 8 billion daily video views and 200 million daily active users, over a day, right? Everything was word of mouth. Everything was, hey, follow this person. Hey, you should check this person out, So I think that if they do something like that, it'll actually modify the DNA of the platform. And I think it's a very similar thing, like you saying, I don't think Twitter should ever become 10,000 characters or have an algorithm because it really would be a detriment to its integrity. I feel the same way about that feature in Snapchat.
Well, then what about the story would probably be the biggest affront to what Snapchat was, and that's that it won't disappear for 24 hours. So platforms, they move and they adapt. And if you think about Facebook, they're the prime example of a platform that's continually disrupted itself and brought in features that caused an uproar and then eventually wound up, being the thing that put it out in front. And I think when you look at Snapchat as a $16 billion valuation on a company, and they don't even have, their monetization strategy while still coming together, I'm very skeptical that they can live up to that kind of evaluation. And I think when you look at something like when Facebook introduced frictionless sharing, they predicted that sharing on Facebook would go up as a result. Well, duh, you've just increased the likelihood that people are going to share because they don't even know they're sharing. So in the same way, if they're at 8 billion video views daily, if you then begin to give them the opportunity to curate, which is honestly what's driving most of the platforms on the web these days, is curation rather than creation. Since creators are such a smaller segment than curators, wouldn't that help to grow Snapchat? Or do you think that that is really such an affront to their DNA that you'd see the loyals walk away?
Yeah, I wouldn't be happy with that. I think that there's a point where the functionality becomes too complex, or rather people get confused as to what they should be doing, right? Like, am I getting on Snapchat to consume content? Am I getting on Snapchat to create content? Am I getting on Snapchat to consume and then curate content? I think when you start deviating, it makes it difficult, right? And I think that if they decide to do something like that, I think it'll have more of a negative effect. But that's just my opinion. I'm obviously, I was an early adopter of the platform. I really like how it is now. I have no problems creating content every day. And if I don't create content every day, that's fine, right? I don't have an issue with that. And I've actually noticed that when I don't create content for a day or two, when I do put out content, my numbers are slightly higher because people are like, oh, now she has something to share, right? Mm-hmm. When you just decide to put things out there for the sake of being there, it's like when you talk for the sake of hearing your voice, you need to be a scarcity, right? It's all about the attention. Can you grab it? Can you not? And I think that in terms of monetization, just to address that very, very quickly, I think that they're approaching it the right way. I think the fact that they decided that, hey, us monetizing on lenses is not going to be something we can do at scale was very, very smart. I think their custom geofilters, we haven't mentioned this, but I think this is a big thing for marketers. I know you're big and bullish about, how can marketers use this and how can I sell this to my clients? I think custom geofilters solve two problems. The first problem they solve is that you activate the geofilter based on a geofence. So you're automatically saying, hey, this is the geographical location and these are the people that I want to hit. And that was one problem that Snapchat always had, right? Like, how do I follow people nearby? Like, how can a small business utilize Snapchat in a way that's actually going to be beneficial to their business? Because they don't want people in Austria or the Netherlands or Australia following them. They want people in the vicinity of vicinity of their business to be, consuming their content and then possibly becoming a customer, right? So that's the first problem that it solved. The second one is it solved the issue of, hey, the barrier of entry for businesses, right? Prior to that, it was like, okay, you can pay 6 figures and get a channel, but then you have to produce all this content, and not every business has that, right? So that wasn't ideal. I mean, they were making money off of it. Was it a profitable business model? Absolutely not. It wasn't for the masses. So a $5 entry level or entry fee, and then from there it goes up, makes sense. And actually, the third one I want to mention is that they did introduce some analytics for that. So if you activate a custom geo filter, it'll tell you how many impressions that filter got. So how many people have looked at that filter, swiped through it, whatever it may be. And then there's also a number of how many people use the filter, right? How many people created content. So I think these are the beginning signs of them going into the right direction. We saw that with the Oscars. They had the Snapchat live video on the web. You could tap through that video on web. Am I a huge fan of that? No, because I want the platform to stay mobile centric, right? Mobile only. Now, do they need to do that in order to be sustainable and to thrive in kind of like their next level of business? Absolutely. So I completely understand that. And so I think they are taking steps in the right directions. And I do think that they have a lot of brand marketers in mind as they continue to grow.
Got it. All right. Well, check this out. I'm going to throw a curveball at you. The original reason I had you on here, I had a whole bunch of questions for you, and we wound up just kind of riffing and talking about Snapchat. So here's what I'm going to do, and if you agree, just say yay. I'm going to make this a 2-parter. So what I'm going to do is we're going to wrap this one, and we're going to immediately jump on to part 2, and we're going to release them as 2 separate ones. You cool with that?
Sure. Yep.
Sweet. So for all of those out there who are listening, this is Jeff Gibbard. I've been here with Saba. Saba, tell people where they can go and find you, and then encourage them at the end of that to listen to part 2 of this.
Yes. So you guys can find me on Twitter as well as Instagram and Snapchat. My handle is Saba Sedili, SABASEDIGHI. You can also email me if you want to get a hold of me personally, Saba at iStream, STREAM, social.com. But I would definitely encourage anyone who is listening to this podcast to, hit me up on Snapchat. You can message me. You can send me a video. I will get back to you. Let me know your thoughts on this podcast, and definitely check out part 2, because I'm sure Jeff is going to be throwing some curveballs, and I'm going to have fun answering.
I never make it easy, but I always make it fun.
Yes, that is very true.
Good. All right, all of you listening, thank you for listening. Please come back for part 2. It is going to debut after part 1 because chronology is important to me. You've been listening to the True Voice Media Podcast, and you made it all the way to the end of the episode. I'm proud of you. But now that you're here, this is what we're going to need you to do. First of all, head on over to your favorite podcast platform and give us a rating. If you don't know where to start, go to truevoicemedia.com/feedback. Next, if you're not yet a subscriber, it's time you fix that. Head over to truevoicemedia.com/podcast to subscribe by iTunes, Stitcher, or email. If you really want to show us some love, visit our partners and sponsors who help make this show possible. I know the show feels free, but trust me, it's not. I sure ain't done publishing these episodes, so I sure hope you're not done listening. I'll see you on the next one. Take care.